Hi and welcome to RCKicks. On today's show, well, the plan is we're returning to the DB-01 from Tamiya, yeah, the Durga. In this episode, we're going to put some upgrades on it and then we're going to take it racing. We're putting it head to head with my modern PRSB401. 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. So, can it fight it out? Well, that's what we're going to find out. So first we're going to go through all the upgrades that I've done. Then we're going to put it head to head on the track. Yes, you're going to see them going around exactly at the same time with the same driver on the same day with the same track. And then we can compare the overall results and see what it tells us. So if that interests you, stay tuned. So before we take it racing, let's go through all the upgrades that I've done since the previous video. Now, if you haven't seen those, I'll put a link up here. Go check them out as you drop right into the middle of this series. I did an unboxing video, a build video, and then we took it running to get a feel for how it was as a shakedown. Now, if you haven't seen those videos, it's definitely worth watching as you're missing out and coming right into the middle. Anyway, so the first thing that I found when I took it for a shakedown previously was the shocks. They were very oversprung, underdampered, didn't like them at all, and it really let the car down. So I've upgraded to the Tamiya big bore aeration shocks. These were £68. That is the cheapest I could find them. Now, there was a fundamental issue with the Durga if you're going to take it carpet racing, and that's it was not designed to go carpet racing. There was some modifications with the RR and the RRR, whatever. But the issue is with the standard towers and standard shocks or the big bore aeration shocks, the original towers are too short. So you couldn't get the car low enough. With carpet racing, obviously you want to get it nice and low and you couldn't do it. So I've picked up some aftermarket carbon towers that have been adjusted to make them longer so it gives the car more travel but gets the car lower. And you've really got to do that if you're going carpet racing. They were £26 from a guy who makes them on the Facebook groups. You can also find them on eBay, I think, as well. So that was the fundamental things that you've got to change it if you're going to go carpet racing for sure. It's just, it just doesn't work very well. Obviously there's the wheels and tyres. I changed those to carpet. There are yellow cactus rears and these are fusions from Schumacher on the front, but I will be replacing these for brand new ones for the next installment because these ones are old, wearing, worn out ones. Next is the suspension mount on the front. They are £18 each and there's two of them, so you've got a front one and a rear one. Basically that's where the pins of the pivot pins for the arms meet at both ends at the front, so it holds them in place. So there was that one that's changed. Then I had the C-hubs. They were £23 for the set. Let me just move the body off and we can have a look further in. Now, a big one that I highly recommend, and it did really help a lot, was changing the steering. The actual steering bridge and the actual steering arms themselves, I changed them to alloy ones. The problem is I looked today to see if I could find a set and there's almost nothing available. Even aftermarket ones were nowhere to be seen. I only found one set of alloy, the arms, not the bridge. They're separate. Tamiya sells them separately. Why? I have no idea. And someone wanted £69 for them. Yes, £69, and that's not the full steering. You'd still have to find a bridge, which I couldn't find today anyway. So that is a real issue, but let's just say you could find a set of aftermarket ones. You're going to pay roughly £45 to £50-ish, I would assume, for both sets. Luckily, I managed to get hold of a set because that made a big difference to the car, and that's a must for sure. Next, when we turn over the car, you'll notice that you've got these blocks at the fronts. Now, obviously, they're the other end of the pin, so changing the alloys front and back ones, it holds the pin, which makes it much stronger when you smack things at the front. So I would recommend those. They're a bit easier to get hold of. The blocks are £15 for a set of two, so obviously that's £30 for all four, but overall that's pretty good value and they're readily available. So getting hold of these blocks and the Front and rear ones, again, were quite easy, even though they're £18 each. Now, I have got some carbon composite parts, the top of the drive belt covers, but you're not really necessarily going to need to do those. You could just leave them. I actually had the composite towers as well, which was an upgrade. So I've removed an upgrade to fit a different upgrade, but you don't really necessarily need to buy those. So I didn't really include them in this price upgrade, as that's a nice thing to have, not a necessity. Then we move round to the back. I've actually got rear alloy hubs. The rear hubs are £23 for a set. Again, do you really need them? Probably you could get away with not having them, but I managed to get a load of parts in one big deal, so I saved myself a lot of money. Another one that is a bit of a must, which I fitted in the first video, was the gear diffs. Now, I found them for £35.7 each, so two of those, you're going to be looking at £70. Sometimes someone sells a pair of them together and you can get them for more, £55, but obviously if you're going to be going carpet racing, you really want the gear diffs, especially if you're going to be running modern power. Another must was the slipper clutch, which I put in right from the beginning, and that was £59. Another one that you can kind of get away with to a point is to leave the dog bones in the rear and then just put universals in the front. Now, there's different types of universals you can get. I've got the harder ones to find and slightly more expensive, but I've also put the upgraded ones in the rear that are just the hop-up ones from Tamiya, but you could leave the dog bones in the rear if you wanted to and just upgrade the front. Now, if you wanted to do that, you're looking at £28 for a set of two, so obviously you can double that if you want to put them on the front and rear, giving you a total of £56.60. So I know what you're wondering, how much is that in total? Well, I also looked up what the kit price is currently, and the cheapest one I could find was £154.26. The problem is that's in Japan, so if you add on the import, now that price was including shipping, and I thought that was quite a reasonable price. You're looking at handling fee, yeah, a bit of a con, but £12. Then you've got the 20% import tax from the UK, which is £30.85. So the kit itself comes in at £197.11. So if we squish all that together, you're currently looking at £614.36. Yeah, if you add the steering in for another 50, which I would recommend you do, you're looking at £664 for a rolling chassis. Now, to put that into context, I worked out the prices of my PR Racing. This is obviously roller. This is not talking about electronics at all. To have a roller exactly the same, currently the kit is £529.99. I changed the arms to the hard arms, don't necessarily have to, but I found it improved performance, and that was £8.50 for two, so double that. Then I changed to the lightweight chassis, which was £68, because I thought the car came alive a bit more with it. But you didn't have to do that, but there's things like that on the Durga as well, so you know, we'll take it with a pinch of salt. So that gave me a PR Racing total of £615. So you're talking £50 less than the Durga where it sits as a roller. Yeah. Now, obviously, there's little bits you could leave off and little bits you could add, and prices are slightly varying. But just to give you an idea that if you're buying a Tamiya racing buggy, you are paying top dollar for it. Yes, I know what you're going to say. Well, you could get a TRF501X second hand, and you can get that for way less than £660 odd for a DB-01, and it'll be a much better buggy. Yes, that would be the second hand, which means it's used. So as a used price, you can't then compare it against the new in-box PR Racing, can you? You'd have to compare it against a used PR Racing SB401, which was definitely going to be cheaper than £400, being it was £600 brand new anyway. So it doesn't really work, does it? Also, if you buy a TRF501X, you break it, which you're going to do when you go racing every week with it. How are you going to find any replacement parts for it whatsoever? And that's the reason why I didn't buy one of those and I bought a DB-01, is a DB-01 is going to be slightly easier to find parts for, apart from alloy steering. Anyway, that's the reason why I picked it, and it was cheaper. So it's a better option to compare it against the PR Racing. Tamiya fanboys are not going to like that. I'm going to make it even worse for you. Not just this, pick any TRF car. They're always going to be more expensive to fix and harder to fix than so many other options. Unless you maybe if you live in Japan. Oh, that's gonna sting, right? So I think that pretty much covers all the upgrades, and knowing that they're roughly equal in cost, let's see how they perform on the track. 2, 1, 3, 4. So what I did to give it a true representation is I've overlaid both races. The top one is the Durga and the bottom one is PR Racing, and I sync them from the word go. So we're basically following both cars around at the exact same time so we can see the difference per lap. Also to the left I put the lap times in, so every time we go around past that last line by the stage it will actually give us the time so we can see the deltas between the two of them, also the way that they drive compared to each other. Now as you can see, the raw power that I have from the PR Racing is pushing on. The issue with that is that the power brings on more mistakes. So I tried to get 2 full races where there was almost no mistakes, but there is one time where the car flipped over for the PR Racing and it had to be marshaled. So I talk about it at the end, as you can see how much extra time that cost. But the main thing I think you can see when you look at these overlaid is I'm just missing raw pace. The actual handling of the Durga is not so bad, and that kind of fits with how I feel when I'm driving the car. Now the Durga loses most of its time in the top right hand corner, going across those flat areas that are in brown and that last corner. When I come out of that corner there's a lot of waiting. So my plan is, in the next video I'm going to fit exactly the same electronics in the Durga to see whether that can bring it up to match the PR Racing. Now if we look on track what positions we're in, the Durga is just going past the stage, but the PR Racing is now coming around towards the stage, so we're almost clawed up a full lap on the Durga, and we're not even halfway through the race. Now from a feel point of view, the Durga does feel well planted and very easy to drive, whereas the PR Racing is much more aggressive, much more nimble, and a lot more on the edge, but it has a lot more power, which is how I like it. So I enjoy driving the PR Racing more in this current configuration, and as my driving skills improve, I'll make less and less small mistakes. The car will get faster and faster, whereas currently as it stands now, the Durga I made almost no mistakes, so I'm tapping out at the maximum of what this chassis can do with the electronics that are currently in it. Now I've cut back to the Durga full screen so you can get a better understanding of how it's performing on the track with the upgrades that have been installed. The lap times on the left are still ticking through for both cars, so you can currently see what the PR Racing is doing even though we're not looking at it right now. A slight little mistake at the top there cost me a few seconds, but then we're back on it again. It does jump across there really well. That was a bit close, wasn't it? But overall it's very well mannered. Now I cut back to the PR Racing to show you the actual mistake that I made there. Now this is the only time that the PR Racing needs to be marshalled, but I will reference this later, and it shows you just how much time you lose if you make a mistake. And it really does prove consistency is the key. As it stands right now, the PR Racing has more potential in it than the Durga does. It's my driving that's slowing up the PR Racing, whereas the Durga is basically maxing out, and I'm waiting for it to put in faster lap times due to not having the amount of power. In a second you'll see a mistake that I constantly make with the PR Racing. Here, as I come in here, I came in too hot, so I went too deep into that corner, which cost me time. That's another thing, having a car that's just so punchy and so fast, you've got to get your braking points and your acceleration points bang on, otherwise it's much easier to overshoot and burn up more time. Right, so let's cut back to the Durga and see how that's getting on. Now if you look down the straight here, you realise just how much slower it is versus watching the PR Racing, but it's pretty smooth and it's behaving itself pretty well. The back is talking to the front and it turns in reasonably well. Now in its defence, the tyres on both cars were on the way out, but the ones that are on the Durga are way more worn out. So the plan is in the next video I will be running brand new tyres on both cars just to get rid of that variable. But considering it's early days for the Durga, especially running in this configuration, as I've upgraded a lot of things and there's a lot of settings that will need to be dialed in, it's pretty good. It's in the ballpark and I'm happy with it. Do I think we can get more out of it? Yes, I do. Can we get a lot closer to the PR Racing? I don't know yet. I'm not sure. We'll have to see once I put the new electronics in it, how the chassis handles that additional power. It could actually make the car worse because it can't deal with the power, or it could help bring the car alive a little bit more and claw back some more of that lost time. So let's crunch the numbers. Obviously the PR Racing did 23 laps where the Durga did 22. The more mistakes were seen in the PR Racing, especially on lap 14 and some of 15. If you look at lap 14, the PR Racing did it in 1777, which is 3.55 seconds slower than the average from Durga. Now, the reason I picked these two races is that that was the only mistake I made, as I wanted to try and keep it as consistent as possible, as a crash really does impact your overall numbers. The best laps were PR Racing at 12.26 and the Durga was 13.41. That's 1.15 seconds off between the two. Now, if you look at the average, and this is where you sort of boil it all down, the Durga is currently 0.87 seconds behind the PR Racing. So as for my final conclusions to this one, well, excuse me, it's boiling in here. It's gone from freezing cold to now melting in the studio under the lights. Anyway, there's one thing I wanted to touch on that seems to have been commented quite a few times on the Facebook groups and in the comment sections of the latest videos. And that's, I've got a TRF car and I went and I beat such and such cars and such cars. Yes, but you're forgetting that you drove it and they drove the other ones. That is called a variable. And when you're trying to compare two things together, you need to remove as many variables as possible. Thus, comparing the way you drove something against someone else is invalid. It makes no difference. What you've got to do is you've got to give both chassis to the same person, preferably at the same time, on the same track, on the same day, with the same weather, with the same tires, with the same electronics. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So there's no point commenting that you beat somebody else with another car because the variable of the person, obviously. Final conclusions to this one. Well, I'm going to have to hold out a little bit because the tyres weren't exactly the same. Also, the big one, the one that I don't know, is the electronics. So the next thing we've got to do is fit exactly the same electronics, which is what we're going to do because I've got a set of Corsa-Tech. So we're going to put exactly the same ESC motor. I'm also going to set up this exact same profiles for the ESC as well to match both cars. Also this week, I'm going to buy brand new tyres for both cars so that they're going to have the same level of grip available to both cars at the same time. So the checklist is same driver, same servo, same battery, same ESC, same motor, same track, same weather, same driver. I might have gone over a few of those, but that's the best way I can think of to really give you an honest comparison between two chassis. So if you want to find out really how close can I get a DB-01 to a modern racing buggy, I guess you're just going to have to subscribe and wait and see. Thanks so much. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.